I'm Malcolm McCrae, and I'm an urban airbrush artist. Airbrushing gives me freedom, and it gives me the ability to be able to express myself through art. It teaches you patience. Most people think that airbrushing is like spray painting, where you just push down on the nozzle. But it is a great technique and skill that comes along with it. While working on an airbrush piece, what I usually do is blend in the traditional airbrush style and add some of my own personal techniques. I love doing faces and facial features because it allows me to play a little bit with the depth, shadow, and highlight. I love the way shadows and the way light reflects off of the different curves and lips and noses. I love fluorescence, I love neons, so I use those colors in the same way that most traditional painters would use cyan or magenta. Passion is one of those things that is just a part of who I am and what I try to portray in my artwork.
Malcolm, how you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Welcome to Expressions, man.
It's a pleasure being here.
Airbrushing. How did you get involved in airbrushing?
Well, I kind of grew up in the art background. My father was an art instructor for the Boys and Girls Club. So I grew up around creativity and art, and maybe I'm a 80s baby, so maybe like around late 80s, I was in a mall and I seen a guy airbrushing t-shirts. And around those times is when hip hop was just kind of like in its prime. And a lot of the LL Cool J, the rappers, was wearing, you know, different clothing and overalls with airbrushing, and I just kind of gravitated towards it, and it was just something that I wanted to do.
Oh, I mean, the urban scene during that time was, I mean, unbelievable.
Yes, it was.
But I understand that you're an urban airbrush artist.
Right, right.
What is that about?
Well, I mean, when people say urban, the first thing people always think of as far as the aspect of being black. I think the urban lifestyle is a lifestyle, it's a culture behind it. And a lot of artists kind of stay away from that whole urban feel because they don't want to be categorized.
Right, right.
Well, with me, it's a little different. I was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was, you know, I was kind of born and raised in a era where the urban community was pretty much, it was strong, and I gravitated towards that as being a youth, and that's pretty much kind of like how I categorize myself now. So
you describe yourself as an urban artist, but also you had a concept or idea that you refer to as urban fusion? Urban fusion,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Urban fusion.
Urban fusion it came out of just being a youth and being young and kind of doing different aspects of art. For a while I was doing fashion, for a while I was doing videography, and so on. And instead of just saying, well, I'm just gonna be an airbrush artist, I decided to fuse all these different elements together and with an urban twist to it. Okay. And kind of grow it and build it from there. So when I do my art shows, a lot of the shows are called Urban Fusion.
So how did you, I mean, in terms of you putting all these things together, what sparked you to even consider fusing all these ideas together to create urban fusion?
Well, you know, being young and being, you know, in the streets is you didn't have a lot of the opportunities to be able to go to school or have a lot of opportunities to be able to have some of the raw materials that you need. So it was one of those things where I just would you know, gravitate. I knew that I needed a videographer, or I knew that I needed somebody that can do photography for me. I couldn't find anybody. So I was forced to just, you know, do it by myself and be independent. And so I'm a self-taught artist, so everything that I do, I pretty much, I teach myself and I go real hard at it.
A self-taught artist?
Yeah, I'm self-taught, okay.
Yeah. We have it's kind of interesting because when we talk about, you know, self-taught artists, especially amongst African-American, the term visionary is used. Right. They always referring to, they're visionaries. Right. You know, they have a vision and they move with it.
Right. Right.
How for me, I've done a number of interviews, and I always talk about how art saved my life.
Right.
But art, you say art saved your life.
Yes, sir.
So,
yes, sir.
I mean, can you explain how did it save your life?
Well, a couple of different instances in my life. you know, being a teenager and all of the different loopholes and things you can kind of find yourself and get caught up in as being a young black youth. I was, you know, young, and I didn't really do the school thing. I didn't really do the school thing. Art was pretty much my life. That's what I did. And a lot of my friends, they would be out doing all kind of reckless things. And my father always taught me it's okay to hang around with people, but when it's time for you to do your thing, you go do your thing. And I
heard that.
Yeah, and a couple times, you know, it would be for one situation that I do remember. I was around 16 years old, and a couple friends of mine called me up. They always respected me, kind of doing my own thing. And at the time, I had my own shop. I had my own airbrush shop. And I remember them calling me up, hey man, let's go out and let's go have a good time, and so on. And I was working on a project for a client at that time, and I was like, I gotta get this project done by tomorrow. Make a long story short, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I had one of the only shops that we did a lot of memorial t-shirts. A customer comes in and they say, okay, I want to get some memorial shirts done. I asked them what happened, and a young gentleman got killed.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a sad story, and I asked him where, and it just so happened to be at my friend's house, who called me that night before to go out. So I called him. You know, I said, hey, what's been going on? I heard something happened at your house, and come to find out that a fight broke out and a young guy got killed, and I could have easily been in a car with them that night. To this day, a lot of my good friends are in prison, incarcerated, and luckily Art, that I had something that can keep me focused, or I wouldn't be here, you know, to this day. So
I definitely understand where you're coming from.
Yes.
Coming from a community where there was a lot of violence and street violence and so forth, and when we look at the number of African Americans, particularly that's in school versus being incarcerated, and those being killed, we just even have a recent incident where a young teenager was just killed.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Can you share some of the themes that you have in your artwork? And it seems like you have a nice broad perspective, but yet broad within a particular framework.
Right. A lot of it comes from my background growing up. My dad was always, matter of fact, I would watch, you know, public television all the time. You know?
Well, we have to watch public television.
You got to. So just kind of growing up, listening to just different aspects of music, looking at different aspects of history. My dad is an information buff, you know, so I grew up around a lot of information, history. And it was always one of those things where my father always taught me is that you don't focus in on anything unless you can have a good conversation about it. You know, master and try to study something. You know, so when a conversation happens and you might know about this thing, you don't want to just be, you know, talking. So a lot of my things with the artwork and a lot of my subject matters are built around some of the same backgrounds. Jazz has been a crazy influence in my life. Okay. And I like to use just different kind of materials to kind of express that.
Would any particular piece is your favorite that talks about jazz or jumps out at you?
Yeah, the piece over here, the Billie Holiday, I call it Billie Cries.
Oh, okay.
And this piece right here it means a lot to me because at that moment in time I was going through a transition in life where the business and the art, I was fighting, you know, in between, you know, trying to figure out how to be successful. And that piece kind of describes some of the frustration I was kind of going through.
You were going through some serious improvisation.
I was going through it. I was going through it.
A multimedia piece. I mean, what are some of the things that you're using in the work?
Well, what I try to do is I try to be realistic, and I try to use creativity, and I try to just make sure that I'm digging within. What I do a lot of times is I use a lot of recyclable stuff. I use pretty much whatever I can get my hands on. A lot of artists, you know, and I think that's coming just from the background that I grew up in, just being without. So a lot of the materials that I use is just a lot of recyclable materials.
Okay. What about the Duke Ellington?
Duke Ellington. That piece right there is powerful. That piece, like I said, the jazz influence. I studied the Harlem Renaissance, and I was looking at a lot of the growth and a lot of build. And we was talking about visionaries. We was talking about that, and just seeing some of the triumphs some of these jazz musicians go through. One thing that I realized as far as art and music, it plays a big part. You know, it overlaps. I was watching a documentary actually on Duke Ellington, and he was talking about how he envies artists, and most artists envy musicians. So that was kind of like that piece right there was off of it's recyclable material. It's actually on upholstery vinyl that I painted it on and screen printed it.
That was a powerful period in American history with the Harlem Renaissance.
Yes, it was.
And it's interesting because a lot of times Harlem Renaissance, they focus mostly on literature and music.
Right.
And we've been pushing for them to look more at the visual artists of that period, because literary artists and the performance artists were very interested in what was being done.
It was some powerful things going on back in those days.
Them. Yeah, them.
The them piece is, I started off, I remember being a kid and fooling around with paper mache. You remember paper mache?
Oh, yes, yes.
So I was just in my studio and I was kind of fooling around. I said I want to do something with a little bit more texture. So I found some newspaper and decided to just take some plaster and do a real aggressive kind of edge around this frame. And I used some Masonite as a paneling and kind of started just coming up with the concept.
Kind of playing with the divine play.
Yeah, I like to play.
I like to play. That's one of Ro Bearden used to always talk about. We have to be engaged in divine play.
Right.
Another piece I want to talk about is the Ogun.
Ogun.
Now, Ogun, if my memory serves me, is a Yoruba word for, rites of passage, a ritual for young black males.
Right. Well, it's a deity. It's actually a warrior.
Yeah.
And the Ogun piece, I was actually doing some research about African origins as far as culture, religion, and some of the cultures that was able to succeed through slavery. And the Yoruba culture is found all across America, whether you looking down in New Orleans to the Cajun and the French quarters, all the way through the South and so on. So I was doing some pieces, and this Ogun deity kind of like popped up, and I just had to paint it.
Oh man, and it's a powerful piece.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm really impressed with the work that you've done.
Oh, thank you.
What are your real briefly? What are your next moves?
I got a couple of different things that I'm working on right now. Actually, I'm working on trying to get into some of the schools and work with some of the youth.
Excellent.
We need to be able to build the next generation of artists.
That'll be a great closing.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, excellent.